The chapel bell's final toll faded into silence, yet the sound echoed in the widow's heart like a cruel reminder. Her husband was gone, and with him, the fragile thread that tied her to safety. Clutching her newborn, she stood alone as people walked past without offering comfort. Their whispers carved into her skin. Her husband's kin turned their backs as though she were a stranger. "You've no claim here," his brother spat before storming away. The widow's breath caught in her throat, but pride forced her to stand tall, even as the child's tiny whimper broke her resolve. By dusk, the land she once called home had turned into hostile soil. She trudged away, the baby pressed close against her, the hem of her dress heavy with dirt. The farmhouse that once smelled of bread and laughter now barred its doors against her. A sister-in-law watched from the porch with a face carved of stone. "Best keep walking," she said coldly, arms crossed, heart closed. The widow kept her gaze on the horizon, too broken to argue. Only the weight of the child kept her moving forward into an unforgiving night. The dirt road stretched endlessly. Beneath her weary feet, each step seemed to mock her grief, pressing her deeper into despair. Houses passed by, lanterns glowing warmly, but none opened their doors to her knocking. Families whispered. Women pulled children inside. Men shook their heads. A widow with a newborn meant nothing but burden, and no one wished for extra mouths to feed. She whispered prayers into the night, each word swallowed by the emptiness of the sky. Her body shivered, hunger gnawing at her. Yet she pressed the infant closer. Her vow clear, he must survive. She found refuge in the shadow of a half-broken barn. Its beams cracked, the roof gaping open to the stars. Coyotes howled across the plain, their cries laced with hunger. The widow sat trembling, shielding her baby with her shawl, heart pounding at every distant rustle. She dared not sleep, fearing the world would swallow her whole if she closed her eyes. Tears streaked her cheeks as she hummed softly to the child, the lullaby breaking into sobs. "I'll keep you safe," she promised, though she wasn't sure how. The night stretched long, filled with the echo of her despair. Dawn brought no mercy. Her bones ached, her throat dry, her lips cracked. She staggered toward town, the baby whimpering in her arms. Desperation guided her to the general store, where she begged for food. The storekeeper's eyes hardened, his jaw set firm. "No handouts," he barked, waving her away as though she were filth. Her knees buckled, but she forced herself outside, stumbling into the dust-choked street. Wagons rolled past, kicking dirt onto her skirt, their drivers looking away. Shame burned in her chest, the kind that cuts deeper than hunger. She sank to the ground, clutching her baby close. She whispered into his tiny ear, voice cracking, "Don't cry, little one, I'll find a way." Yet her own stomach twisted painfully, and her milk was running dry. The child whimpered louder, rooting weakly against her dress. Her arms trembled as despair swallowed her whole. Collapsing into the dirt, she bowed her head, tears falling freely. For the first time, she wondered if God had truly abandoned her. The world blurred through her tears, and she no longer cared who saw her broken. She was a mother stripped of everything: home, love, and dignity left, with only a fragile life in her arms. The sound of boots crunching on dirt startled her. A voice, rough but steady, cut through the silence. "You need help, ma'am." She lifted her gaze, vision blurred. A rancher stood before her, tall and broad-shouldered, his shadow long against the morning sun. His hat-shaded eyes lined by years of labor, yet there was kindness in them, something she hadn't seen since her husband's death. His shirt was worn, patched from countless days in the saddle, and behind him stood a wagon laden with feed. He looked at her, then at the child, and his expression softened with understanding. Her lips parted, but no words came, only a broken nod. She was too weak to speak, too worn to question. The rancher extended his hand, steady as stone. "Come with me," he said, his tone quiet yet unyielding. She hesitated. Strangers had been cruel before. Why trust another? But the child stirred in her arms, and she felt she had no choice. Slowly, she placed her trembling hand in his. He helped her rise, lifting her gently onto the wagon as though she were fragile glass. The wooden wheels creaked as he drove, but with each turn, her heart lightened. The land they reached wasn't rich or grand, it was weather-worn, with sagging fences and a cabin leaning slightly with age. Yet it was alive. Cattle grazed lazily, chickens scratched at the dirt, and the scent of wood smoke drifted from the chimney. The widow's breath caught as the rancher climbed down, lifting the baby from her arms with unexpected tenderness. He carried the child inside, his rough hands cradling the infant as though he were precious beyond measure. Inside, the cabin welcomed her with warmth, the table set simply, bread on the counter, and the faint crackle of a fire burning low. He set a tin cup of water in her hands, then placed bread before her. "Eat," he said, his voice firm but kind. She trembled, overwhelmed by the sight of food. Tears spilled before she could stop them, falling onto her child's blanket. Why, help me," she whispered. The rancher didn't answer at first. He only shrugged, his gaze steady. "A man can't watch another soul starve," he said quietly. She pressed her lips together, unable to reply. The world had turned. So cruelly here was one man whose mercy burned brighter than the fire in his hearth. Asterisk that night. She lay beneath real blankets, her child nestled against her heart. The mattress creaked beneath her tired frame, yet it felt like heaven after weeks of cold ground. The stars glittered through the cabin window, watching over her fragile peace. She closed her eyes, whispering a vow into the night. I'll find my strength again for him. For the first time since her husband's death, warmth returned to her bones. But as sleep pulled her close, one thought lingered. Why would a man with no ties to her, no reason to care, choose to open his door when even family had cast her aside? She would soon learn the reason. Asterisk the days passed, with a rhythm she had never known before. Morning light streamed through the cabin windows as she rose to tend the fire, cradle her son, and prepare a modest meal. The rancher was already outside, by then, working the land with a quiet determination. At first, she thought her stay was temporary, that once she regained strength, he would send her on her way. Yet each day ended the same hymn, walking back through the cabin door with a nod and a faint smile, as if her presence had already been woven into the life of the place. Asterisk, she found herself doing what came naturally: mending clothes, sweeping floors, feeding chickens. It felt good to work again, to feel useful, though she never forgot how she arrived, broken and unwanted. The rancher never demanded anything, never spoke of repayment, only left space for her and the baby to heal. It was a kindness she struggled to understand. He gave her time without questions, and in that silence, she found a peace she had thought forever lost. Slowly, her grief began to loosen its grip on her heart. Asterisk in the evenings, she sat on the porch, with her son asleep in her arms. The wide sky burned orange with the setting sun, and she often caught the rancher resting against the porch rail, his gaze lingering not on the land but on the child's tiny fingers curled against her dress. Sometimes he spoke of the weather, sometimes of cattle, but mostly he was quiet. And in that quiet, something like companionship began to bloom between them. A bond, unspoken yet undeniable. Asterisk one evening, when the stars had just begun to flicker across the darkening sky, she found the courage to ask the question that had burned in her chest for weeks. "Why did you take me in?" she whispered. Her voice trembled with more than curiosity, it carried fear. What if his kindness was only temporary? What if she was merely a guest, destined once more to be cast out? The rancher didn't answer right away, only leaned back against the post, and looked out toward the distant fields. Asterisk his voice, when it came, was steady, but rough, like the land itself. "I've worked this place alone for years," he said, "had no wife, no children. Folks say I'm cursed, too stubborn, too set apart, but when I saw you holding that baby, something inside me said, maybe it was time to stop living like a ghost." He turned then, meeting her eyes with quiet honesty. "It wasn't pity, ma'am, it was knowing. I saw myself in your loneliness, and I couldn't walk away." Asterisk her breath caught, and her vision blurred with sudden tears. "You saved us," she whispered, her voice breaking. The rancher shook his head gently, his hat brim shadowing his eyes. "No," he murmured. "Maybe you saved me." The weight of his words settled deep within her, wrapping around her tired heart. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt something stir beyond survival, a fragile hope that perhaps her life wasn't over, only beginning anew. That night, she lay awake listening to the wind howl across the fields. No longer afraid of the emptiness. Asterisk, as the weeks turned into months, her strength returned. She laughed softly when her son cooed in the mornings, finding joy in his every new sound. She baked bread, sewed curtains for the cabin, and planted flowers by the steps. These small touches filled the home with warmth, and she noticed how the rancher lingered at the door, almost startled by the difference her presence had made. Yet he never tried to claim her or the child. His kindness came with no conditions, only the freedom to belong if she chose to. Asterisk one afternoon, the rancher returned from town with folded papers tucked under his arm. His face was unreadable, but there was a weight in his eyes as he set them down before her at the kitchen table. "This land," he said, tapping the deed, "is yours now. I've signed it over to you and the boy. No man can take it away." She froze, her hands trembling as she unfolded the papers. Her name, her son's future. She looked at him in disbelief. "But why?" she whispered, her voice breaking under the enormity of his gift. Asterisk, he leaned against the chair, his expression steady. "Because I have no heirs," he said simply. "This land deserves a family, not a ghost. You already live here like it's your home, and I can't think of anyone better to keep it alive. You don't owe me a thing. Just raise that boy strong, and let him know he was never unwanted. That's all the thanks I need." His words struck her deeper than any riches could. For the first time since her exile, she felt chosen, not discarded, not a burden, but chosen with purpose. Asterisk her tears spilled freely as she clutched the papers to her chest. She knelt on the wooden floor, overcome with gratitude that no words could express. "Thank you," she sobbed, her voice raw. The rancher bent and lifted her gently, resting a calloused hand on her shoulder. No need for thanks, he said, softly, just live. Just let the boy grow, and smile again. That'll be thanks enough. In that moment, she felt something shift inside her, no longer just a widow surviving the world's cruelty, but a mother given a second chance to build a life. Seasons changed, and the ranch began to flourish under their care. Where once neighbors gossiped about the cursed rancher, now they whispered of a strange blessing upon the land. They saw a woman smiling in the fields, a child laughing and running along the fences, and a man whose eyes no longer carried the weight of solitude. What had been barren now bloomed, not because of fortune, but because kindness had planted roots that could not be shaken. Slowly, the community's suspicion gave way to quiet respect. In the end, their story was not about loss, but about redemption. A woman, cast aside, found shelter not in charity, but in dignity, restored. A man who thought he would die alone, discovered that giving everything he had away was the surest way to keep his heart alive. And a child, once unwanted, grew strong on the land written forever in his name. Together, beneath skies vast and unending, they built a life not defined by sorrow, but by grace. And in that life, both widow and rancher found the family they never knew they were searching for.